I'm here because my elders danced in the sun. They would give it all up for us, and from day one it was practiced like religion to prepare for the ones to come. We are here to give all our love to the ones unborn. We are here to give all our love to the ones unborn. This is insane, living for fame, living for the next quarter, profits and gains. You forgot love, you forgot truth, you forgot how to live for a time beyond you. It's not about you, it's not about you. It's about the song that is traveling through. It travels through time, singers will die, but the song lives on through matrilineal lines. We are here to give all our love to the ones unborn. We are here to give all our love to the ones unborn. Open your eyes, open your heart.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Andrew Schwartz, and I work for the Center for Earth Ethics. I have the distinct honor of being the convener of this third of 5 dialogues being hosted by the Faith and Food Coalition to contribute to the United Nations Food Systems Summit. The Food Systems Summit is hosted by the UN to raise awareness around the world about the impacts our food systems are having on people and the planet, and to crowdsource solutions for making it more accessible and equitable and sustainable from now into the future. Just very quickly want to say thank you to all the different Faith and Food Coalition partners who have brought these dialogues together. They are the Parliament of the World's Religions, Bhumi Global, the Buddhist Suchi Alliance, the World Evangelical Alliance Association, the Interfaith Public Health Network, and the Islamic Medical Association of North America, and of course, the Center for Earth Ethics. Food is fundamental to us being alive. It's what defines us. We gather around tables and share meals to celebrate or to mourn or just talk about how our days went. Food is a language of love. It marks holidays and religious festivals. It signals what we value and hold dear. There is no better indicator of a culture or where a person is from than the food that they eat. We also know that agricultural production is responsible for roughly 25% of all greenhouse gas emissions. We know that animal protein production, especially cattle, is a major driver of deforestation around the world. And we know that soils are being exhausted by unsustainable farming techniques. The list can go on. The title for this action track is to boost nature positive production, which is what our focus here is today. We know that thousands upon thousands of years, humans lived in harmony with nature, that our interactions with it, the land, actually benefited it rather than destroyed it. We know that there are innovative farming techniques that are nature positive, sequester carbon, and support surrounding ecosystem health. But there's a big gap between knowing what to do and how to do it and actually doing that thing, especially to scale. And that's why we brought together this esteemed panel, each of whom is working in their own ways to make our food systems more sustainable, equitable, and accessible. And so please join me in welcoming our speakers. We have Tosi Mpanu, who is an ambassador and expert in areas of finance, climate change, and economic development. He's a senior negotiator for the Democratic Republic of the Congo on climate issues. He's also here representing Action Track 3, so thank you so much. Tosi, it's a pleasure to host you. We have Felipe Carrazzo. He is the head of public sector engagement at the Tropical Forest Alliance at the World Economic Forum. He's also the president of Árboles Mágicos Foundation in Costa Rica. We have Dr. Iyad Abu-Mogli. He is the director of UNEP's Faith for an Earth initiative. He has more than 35 years of experience with international organizations, the private sector, faith communities, and scientific institutions. Dr. Marcelo Salazar is the executive coordinator of Health and Harmony in Brazil. He has worked with traditional Amazon communities for 18 years to support their sustainable development and protect their rights. Joshua Appensem, sorry, Joshua, I think I just got your name wrong, is the founder of Green Africa Youth Organization, which is leading the first zero waste project in Ghana that provides green jobs and utilizes circular economic principles. We have Lila June Johnson. She's a musician, speaker, and community organizer. She is currently a doctoral student at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, studying indigenous food systems and land management. And we have our moderator, Bibi La Luz Gonzalez, coming from Guatemala. She is an international political economist, merging food security, climate sustainability, and human rights. She's also the founder of Eat Better Waiik. Bibi, I will pass the mic to you. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, everyone.
Thank you, Andrew. I am also very much looking forward to this conversation. I have to say, it kept me up a bit last night because it is such a daunting topic. And we as individuals, or you as an audience, it's key to understand how we can work together, because this is greater than just oneself and needs collective action in order to really move forward in boosting this nature positive mindset, incentives, productions, way of living, way of earning a living. So in this sense, I'm really honored to see what we can have from this conversation. Just taking a bit of what in the training for the UN System Summit, Food System Summit, there's something that our esteemed David Navarro says, that these topics are very complex, and if it's not an easy task, and we shouldn't necessarily simplify it. So understand there's no simple way of doing it, and really comprehend and have that creativity and diversity from numerous parts to see how we can move forward. From last week on Action Track 2, the conclusion was to move towards a plant-based diet and ways of producing. And a lot of people agree in doing that. When I think about it, and I think of nature positive and, for example, zero deforestation, I think of crops that need plenty of land to have that production of food, either for human beings or for animals, cattle, just so many different ways. So how can we move forward in doing these plant-based diets, in not degrading the land, not deforesting? How can we find those solutions? I was also looking at some WWF statistics as how declining the population of biodiversity, animals, mammals, and how much drop in crop diversity there has been. There's 75% of drop in crop diversity in the last 20 years. So how can we make that variety of crops? And for example, for producing countries, normally there are a lot of monocultures. So how can we shift towards that? And how can we change also a market that is really intense in keeping this up? So how can we find this harmony? How can we find this balance? So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Again, this is such a complex topic. If you'd like, please write in the chat your comments, your questions, your thoughts. And also a question to all of you is, have you been outside today with any contact with nature? For the panelists, you can raise your hands that we can see. In the audience, I see Ian. I think it's really, really important that we ground ourselves back again, and really like the concept of, for example, forest bathing, or that Japanese concept, and now it's being more trendy of earthing. So I did go outside. I did say hello to the sun. I went outside too a bit, and so really happy to be here today with you, and really bringing this positive sense in having the nature at the heart of our purpose, right? So thank you so much. We'll be starting off with one general question, and I'll go in this order. First, I'll go with Laila, then Iad, Felipe, Tosi, Marcelo, and then Joshua. So you each have 5 minutes to answer this first question, and then we'll go on a dialogue phase. So please be attentive to what the rest of the panelists are saying, so you can build up upon that and have really something ready after this dialogue. So Laila, thank you so much for joining. We had your song in the introduction part, so thank you so much for setting the mood for that too. So our general question is, how do you integrate nature positive narrative into action in your surroundings? So let's go with you, Laila. Thank you.
Thank you. Ja, het is aro shidene she nanisht trachi inishlo haskai dene bashishin ashin hidishiche ilagana dashanale akut ego dene as aninishlo. I just wanted to introduce my 4 clans as I begin in my mother's language, which is Dene Bazad. I'm of the Nanisht Trachi clan of the Dene Nation, and also otherwise known as Navajo, but we prefer Dene. And in that manner, I present myself as a Dene woman and honor those 4 different clans. And I really appreciate all of you bringing us all together and bringing me into this conversation. In terms of nature positivity and how I bring that into my surroundings through action, well, I really think that the very word nature is interesting in that it automatically splits us from nature in a sense, because we oftentimes view nature as like somewhere out there or going out into nature. We don't understand we are nature. And so to me, nature positivity is synonymous with human positivity. A lot of humanity is seen as a misfit of creation, an outcast or a mistake of creation. And I feel as though that is not the way to look at it, because there's a lot of indigenous nations, Native American, although we prefer indigenous nations, who are actively engaged in the co-creation of ecological systems. In American culture, it's either heavy extractionism or complete hands-off conservationism. And we don't do either of those. We are in the game. We're not on the sidelines. We are nature. We have a role within nature. We support nature. And an example of this is the Heiltsuk Nation of British Columbia, Canada. They hand plant kelp forests along the coastlines and also weight down hemlock and cedar tree branches, which then create surface area for the herring fish to come and spawn. So single-handedly, this indigenous nation manages to increase the surface area upon which the herring can lay their roe, their eggs. And so they have a heavy hand in actually supporting the herring species and all of the medicine that species brings. And these people understand they're not just doing this to eat the eggs, as it's a delicacy in Canada and all around the world. They're also bringing this caloric injection into the system to feed other animals too, because the bear eat the eggs, the salmon eat the eggs, the killer whales up the food chain end up benefiting from those calories, the eagles, the wolves, etc., the sea lions. Everyone flourishes when there's a healthy herring spawning season. And for this reason, their entire calendar begins in February with the coming of the herring. and they believe that the moon tips over and spills that silver light, that silver fish into the ocean and litters the place with this highly nutrient dense eggs. So we are in the game. And so in this manner, the Heiltsuk Nation has become what ecologists call a keystone species, or a species that if you were to remove the species from the system would collapse. And that is true. With the decimation and the destruction of indigenous peoples, they played a significant ecological role in these areas. And when they were decimated through colonization, attempted genocide, disease, etc., these ecosystems went into shock because those stewards and that keystone species was removed, the different stewardship things they did in those ecosystems. And so to me, nature positivity, how I bring that into action is land back, bringing land back to indigenous people so that they can steward these lands. I also do it through doing pilot projects where more and more indigenous peoples can show the world how we can be active participants in nature and also feed ourselves and everyone else around us in turn. So I will stop there. I know we have a lot of panelists and not much time. So thank you so much for letting me share those 2 cents.
Thank you, Lala. You actually still have some time to spare, so I'll ask a second question and follow up on that. What about nature positive food narrative into action? How, I mean, you were talking about the eggs and that, but how, and the bear, but then how do you translate that back in your lifestyle?
Yeah, so I think it's really, I think the Western world very poorly understands food. Even the term food is a strange word. It turns a whole set of dynamic processes from the water from the clouds to the microbial activity in the soil to the perhaps the prescribed burning that my people did on this land for tens of thousands of years that would bring the ashes into the soil and all of the different soil management techniques, and then the seed itself and the growing and the tending of these plants and animals. So to me, food is like something you throw your kid in the back seat when they're hungry. It's like this packaged noun. But to us, in all of the languages I've seen, food is a verb. So to me, bringing like ch'inyan is food in my language. And that literally means the energy that we eat. It's a verb-based word. It has the word energy in it and it has the word to eat. So that energy, that ch'in, is all around and we bring that in. And so it's, to answer your question, I think the way it connects with my life is I try to see all of these processes within my plate of food and understand how all those things are, grow my own food, practice growing my own food, practice expanding deer habitat. A lot of people think we followed the buffalo. The buffalo followed us because we actually had these eco-technologies to steward grasslands. And without us, these grasslands would collapse into shrubland or mesic forests. So the grasslands that a lot of the buffalo in the Great Plains ate from was actually a habitat that we augmented. And so I think really that's another piece of living the food is taking the time to augment habitat, not just steward it, but enhance it and expand it for these different relatives, these different species.
That's brilliant, Laila. Thank you so much for that. And I am learning so many words in each of your languages. I mean, in multiple languages because we're so diverse here. So I am doing some sort of dictionary here of how also to interpret the words. I love the part of energy and eating. Thank you for that. Now I'll go with Iyad. Thank you for being here, and the same goes to you. How do you integrate nature positive food narrative into action in your surroundings?
Thank you, Bibi, and salam, peace to everybody. Well, as a UN bureaucrat, I will be speaking as a UN bureaucrat. So I apologize that I cannot beat Layla from her, heritage perspectives. But let's consider the pillars of nature-based positive food systems, which relate to protecting natural systems, sustainable management of existing food production systems, and restoring degraded lands, while at the same time keeping some land for nature. This is all agrees with the principles of the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration that has started actually in January of this year, but will be officially launched on the 5th of June during the celebrations of the World Environment Day. The Decade of Ecosystem Restoration calls for the prevention of degradation, restoring or regenerating ecosystems, and which are necessary not only for food systems, but also for economic and social prosperity of the people and the planet. In addition, the United Nations Environment Assembly has adopted for 2021 and 2022 the theme of strengthening action to protect and restore nature and nature-based solutions to achieve the SDGs. So we at UNEP, we have adopted the theme of restoring nature as the theme of the World Environment Day, which we will be celebrating in a week or so time. Now, with the pandemic that is casting its shadows on all aspects of life, also UNEP has called for the adoption of circular economy as a transformative recovery strategy that leads to positive nature solutions. So we are no longer talking about the consequences of unsustainable agricultural and fishery only, but we are talking about the natural resource use and the environmental impacts of all food-related activities. And of course, their related governance structures and socioeconomic outcomes. So what has led to this unsustainable food systems? Today, our food is called fossil food because its production is basically based on fossil fuel or non-renewable resources, and of course, leading to the depletion of groundwater reserves and the excessive soil losses. We have been using inappropriate policies, which include, of course, pricing, unsustainable subsidies and tax policies, and have encouraged excessive and uneconomic use of inputs such as fertilizers and pesticides, and we have overexploited the land. So there are several challenges that are facing our food systems. We are facing an expanding population. In 2050, we will be almost 10 billion people. Cities are exploding. Dietaries are shifting to unhealthy and unsustainable consumption. And we are increasing the pressure even more. Globally, the food systems are responsible for more than 60% of the global biodiversity loss and around 24% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and depleting 61% of our commercial fish populations. We face the extinction of 1 million species out of the 7.8 millions that we know today. On top of that, climate change is increasing with the temperature increases and so on, is increasing the risks of food insecurity and water supply. Already, we are facing loss of pollinators. We are facing 70% of the food crops are threatened, and the crop system in general is being threatened. So unsustainable modes of consumption and production where we waste more than 40% of our food even before it gets to our tables to eat. So we need a comprehensive approach in nature positive food production systems. And that is by diversifying our agricultural produce, by introducing more resilient crops to water and, of course, to other health stresses. We need to use artificial intelligence, and especially in remote areas where they suffer from production and distribution of their agricultural produce. And most importantly, we need to adopt to a circular economy with zero waste. We don't have to waste anything that we produce, because there are more than 1 billion people who go to bed every single night without having food on their tables. We need to, at the highest level, think our governance system and the international community response to the food systems, but also to all other associated things like the socio and economic impacts and the insecurity that we are all facing. I hope that I have provided some ways to consider and some issues to consider to get to the positive production systems that we aspire to have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian. I have just a thought and perhaps a question with the technology part that you mentioned, and also the millions who go hungry every night. Usually, they are the ones suffering more from climate consequences and nature-related effects. Just briefly, how can technology and those most vulnerable actually bring together some sort of coalition, let's say, in order to enhance their resilience?
Well,
and be fed, right? And for them to be fed too.
Definitely, of course, when we think about technology, we think about big machinery going to lands and plowing it and so on. But there is positive technology and there's negative technology. For example, if we use the artificial intelligence, as I mentioned, people in remote areas where they, plant some foods and so on, but they don't have access to markets. With simple applications that they can be connected to markets where they know when there is a demand for their systems or for their food products. So they harvested at the right time for the right season and for the right consumption. Definitely, there are countries who have used natural and organic systems, even using, drip irrigation, subsurface agriculture, and so on. So there are technologies that can enhance food production to produce more with less land resources.
Perfect. Produce more with less. I think that is a concept that everyone needs, no matter where they are, in which sector. Thank you so much, Ian. I'll go in with Felipe. Thank you so much, Felipe, for joining us. I'm super happy to have another Central American panelist here. Así que gracias. Buena onda, Felipe, gracias. So how in your sphere, Felipe, how do you integrate that nature positive food narrative in your surroundings? Also considering that TFA really promotes the phrasing of nature positive.
Thank you, Vivi. Mucho gusto. Thanks to everyone. My name is Felipe Carazo. I work as Head of Public Sector Engagement for the Tropical Forest Alliance based at the World Economic Forum. To answer your question, I will, there's two takes to it. There's the perspective from where we go as an alliance, trying to solve deforestation in the tropics linked to soft commodities. And then there's the perspective of how we go about that, because we are people making up that alliance. Whoever represents companies, NGOs, governments, that make up this alliance, it's a person, right? It's a human. And as Lila mentioned, humans are part of nature. So we have to understand our own human nature to forge the appropriate alliances. So on the first piece, what we do in the Tropical Forest Alliance is we try to lead global multi-stakeholder partnerships that can help address commodity-driven deforestation, mainly linked to palm oil, beef, soy, which are extremely, they generate a very extreme impact in tropical forests. There's key producer countries and key consumer countries that are at the end, at both ends of these supply chains. And within that, you have very complex dynamics. And we try to engage corporate leadership to try to tackle this within the scope of their work, not only the direct scope 1 or 2 from a business standpoint, but also try to create a dynamic that goes into the scope 3. Now, when you look at the context, it's not that easy to really be effective because of the complexity of the supply chains and the forces that pull these supply chains in different directions. Would it be market forces, producer forces like incentives, subsidies, but also the public-private dilemma, the development and environment conversation, or even the North and South prejudices we have around. So you see that there's always like this polarization and tension around these different components that affect how effective we are in terms of forest and commodity, in terms of the forest and commodity equation. They produce more with less that Iad has just referred to. Right now, from a systemic standpoint, we gravitate around, creating this enabling environment for these multi-stakeholders to really steer efforts into that. We call it forest positive. It's part of the nature positive. Forest positive meaning, we want to tackle deforestation in the tropics, so this is part of a nature-based solution. For that, you have to engage leadership, corporate leadership, political leadership, community leadership, and build success. There's cases like if you go to Southeast Asia in the last 10 years, despite a lot of impact that we cannot ignore in the previous decades, but the last decade, there's been a swift in terms of the rates of deforestation, and we're just about to share a publication of a study we did last year that shows how there's no, the success in turning the tide was possible because all these different stakeholders from civil society putting pressure into the companies, leading companies, taking some step forward to really include good practices, government doing reforms to really engage or frame these practices at the national and landscape level. They played out into an equation that has translated into a reduction of deforestation rates. But how can we mainstream this across the board so that we don't, it doesn't come back or is not fixed to low prices on demand for palm oil? It's a challenge. So that is a moment where you have to enhance the leadership that has achieved that immediate success and try to bridge public-private dynamics through convenings, coalitions, collaborative work, as you said, Vivi. This brings me to the second component of nature positive. How do you go about it? how do you go about really making sure that people connect and that those dialogues can become effective? And this is about faith, right? This is about faith and food coalitions. Well, how do we have coalitions that are successful because we believe in them? Faith is about believing, and it goes beyond a religious sense. It's about being human, about me having faith in you, because we have faith that we can reach an agreement that takes us to where we desired. I'm trusting you, right? So you need faith. There was a humanist that said you need faith in order to love and to be loved. Well, if we don't have faith, there's an absence of faith. These convenings, these efforts to try to look out for that balanced approach that can minimize the polarization of markets and production, south and north, would not occur, because you need to have faith to make, so that the message from your partner or your counterpart can be perceived as well-meaning and not as a selfish standing, right? If I go into a convening with a different person or stakeholder thinking, I don't trust that person, it's going to be hard, right, to get to that middle ground. But that goes beyond any scientific explanation. We can have all the scientific data to put together where we are in terms of deforestation trends, etc. But at the end, as a coach that I have said, the oxytocin goes so far, right? That's where you can get there in terms of scientific understanding. Then the rest is just about faith, thinking, there's a positive energy that we as humans can steer so that good balanced approaches can come out, and therefore solutions can happen. There's the need not, to go beyond rationality and go into the belief, right? And that comes to the nature positive component. Well, I have to have a belief that I am nature positive, that I am, my nature as a human being, as Lila mentioned, is going to drive that faith for us to humans to align and make difference moving forward. I'll leave it there. I don't know if you have any question or follow-up. I'm happy to continue in the dialogue around these concepts.
Excellent, Felipe. You touched on so many topics, and maybe just one quick follow-up, at least for me to ask it, and then maybe you can answer it now shortly in a minute, and then throughout the rest of the dialogue. You spoke about leadership, trust, and that positive energy. What happens when there is no trust in leadership? Or we want to bring an energy towards responsible leadership, but when people don't have that trust, how can we motivate that energy for those leaders to become trustworthy again, or to motivate those who we trust in those leadership positions? I don't know if you can answer that in 1 minute.
Yeah, it's hard in 1 minute, but I can tell you the following. You can start to assess if leadership is genuine or not. You can, of course, there can be enormous transactional cost to that, right? But at the end, genuine leadership will flourish, right? So if you don't trust a leader anymore, and it's not genuine, because it goes around a self position, you lose faith because that person goes around its own dynamic and not the collective dynamic. Well, then you have to rebuild that trust with that leader or with another leader. The thing is that we as a society have to have faith that we're going to get it right, that we can really connect the dots to have the appropriate collective energy to balance things out and get systems to work. Because there's no other planet and there's no other space, and we need to make sure that this becomes a all-in-one approach.
Perfecto. I'm so great. At least I feel more energized. You definitely energized me, and I hope the audience did too, and the rest of who's going to listen to this later as well. And we'll go on with Dosi. Thank you so much for joining, and with all that we've heard as well. I'd love for you to take in those words in your answer, and how you're integrating nature positive food narrative into action in your surroundings, considering protection, management of ecosystems, and how can we replicate this as well for others to take action too.
Thank you very much, Bibi. It's a pleasure to be part of this great panel, and been really inspired with what I heard so far. And I received, I think, a pretty good insight coming from different perspectives. And this is really what we need. We need to make sure that there is a clash of ideas so that collectively we develop the best approach there is. I'd like to also start by thanking Andrew for inviting me to this event. It is a pleasure to join this dialogue on behalf of Action Track 3, which is Boost Nature Positive Food Production at Scale. And I happen to be the vice chair. The chair is Joao Campari. I believe that engaging a wide range of different groups is really the key to the summits to be a success, and to really be a summit for everyone, everywhere, truly a people's summit. As well as my work to engage governments and companies, it is very important for Action Track 3 for us to hear from a wide range of society members. So the dialogue today is very, very in line with what we aim. So to address the question, Bibi, and before I touch specifically on the question, I think it's important also to recap a little bit on what we try to achieve in Action Track 3, because it's actually going to inform the question. So we are focusing on delivering nature positive production at scale to meet the fundamental human right to healthy and nutritious food within planetary boundaries. To identify the actions needed to achieve this goal, we have asked a diverse range of stakeholders, including member states, civil society, UN agencies, farmers and fishers, to share solutions with us, and we have received more than 350 suggestions. Our role as an action track is then to review and synthesize these ideas into a number of areas to take forward to the Food Systems Summit, as well as incorporating the feedback from dialogues such as this one. So everything which is being shared here, everything which is being said here, will also feed into the work. We have 3 action areas which aim to address all parts of what makes a food production system nature positive. Our first area focuses on protecting natural ecosystems from new deforestation and conversion for food and feed production. Some of the ideas we have here around looking at food supply chains to prevent deforestation and conversion caused by producing commodities like coffee, soy, and chocolate. Another is considering how we can change policies to redirect government support to target conservation and other public goods. Our second action area after the protect is manage. And it is considering how to manage sustainably existing food production systems in land and water for the benefit of people and nature. Here we have a lot of ideas around how to produce food in a nature positive and less extractive and destructive way, in particular agroecological and regenerative practices for farming. We also look closely at how livestock and blue food systems can be made more sustainable. Another area of work is looking at how we can learn from and protect indigenous peoples' food production systems, which have allowed them to produce and harvest food sustainably while conserving their territories, which collectively harbor 80% of the planet's biodiversity. So I was very much moved by Lila's intervention, and I look forward to receiving the YouTube link so that I will be able to listen to the song again later on. Finally, our third action area looks at restoring degraded ecosystems and rehabilitate soil function for sustainable food protection. So protect, manage, restore. And in this third action area, we look for opportunities for how food production can help restore ecosystems. One example is the role that grazing livestock can play in supporting healthy ecosystem in grasslands and savannas. We also look at soils in this action area, and we can both restore soil health and enable the sequestration of carbon into the soils. As you can see, we're working on lots of ideas in Action Track 3, which we hope will enable us to build nature positive, both into the narrative around food systems, but also drive action on the ground. Thank you very much, Bibi.
Thank you, Tosis. Thank you so much for detailing about that, and for the audience. I think it's wonderful for them to know really like the action, and as well that's going to be one of my other questions when we move forward. So I'll go now with Marcelo. Marcelo, how do you put in action the nature positive food narrative in your surroundings?
Thank you, Bibi. Thank you, everyone, to be here. It's a great pleasure. Before answer your question, I would like just to say that I'm in the Amazon rainforest, and we are now in Brazil dealing with the highest rate of deforestation in the planet in the Amazon rainforest. So in the last 33 years, we lost more than 20% of the Amazon rainforest, and there is another 20% degraded by illegal logging, illegal mining. And what happened here is that in the past 10,000 years, the traditional communities, the indigenous people, they manage the forest, and they got seeds from one place to another place, and they domesticated food. And there are about 16,000 different species in the Amazon rainforest. And from them, 227 species were managed by those traditional communities. And we have a lot to learn with them. We are talking about like food materials for house, for canoe, and for rituals, flutes, and other things from those species. And what we did here in Brazil and other parts of the world, in the last 50 years, we just cutted the forest, this 20%, to plant soy, corn, cattle. So just a few products that degrade the soil, that emit carbon and this kind of things, and affect as well the rain to not only to the Amazon rainforest, but to other areas. So the concept of flying rivers, like every day a tree pump water from the soil to the sky, and this water flows, and we can map this through the areas, and it rains in other places. So I think one key of our work here, it's radical listening the traditional communities and learn from them how to create economy of diversity, economy of care, like economy that include this learning from thousands of years managing the forest and creating ingredients, creating ways of food production. So we have a lot to learn from them. And in the region we we work, we support the traditional communities to create, by listening them, to create a network of production, and it's called continuous network. And there is some mini factories as well that are producing several ingredients to several different contracts as well. So using this principle of diversity and generating revenue, and also produces in a bigger scale some ingredients that can go, for example, to school meal, to cities around the forest, and valuing those ingredients. And it's very nice to be part of this network. I can send the link of film and some informations about it. And this is a very practical model that can be replied for another rainforest areas. And I think the one key I really liked it, what Tosi said, like protect, manage, restore. Like one thing to really protect the rainforest and to empower this methodology of management of the forest, and use this learning to restore the deforested areas and to restore our food system. We need to value more and more the knowledge from the traditional communities, and the issue of recognize this knowledge and create instruments to pay it. For example, ecosystem services payment, or reduce the deforestation by the REDD+ methodologies, like to give them money from carbon sequestration, but attaching this money to empower this traditional way of life. So I think this is very important. And to finish, of course, I mean, in Health and Harmony, it's an organization that works with the concept of planetary health. Like food, it's really connected with health. So we need to have a systemic view of the communities and the forests to, at the same time, improve the food security and the healthcare, not only the healthcare for the people, but the health of the ecosystem as a whole. Because if we have the forest standing, we will have water, we will have less carbon in the atmosphere, and we will have diversity of food and cultural diversity as well to the cities around and to the world. So I think it's like we need to be radical listeners of those traditional communities and learn how to spread their knowledge around the world.
And Marcelo, on that, on attentive listening and radical listening of the Amazon population, what you found most enlightening that you are putting into practice now when you are in the city?
I think to have diversity of food, diversity of ingredients, and to have this perspective of biodiversity and diversity and cultural diversity from those communities. So get the food from the forest, and when we plant not only one species, but try to do agroforestry, try to copy this diversity. So I try at most to promote this concept of diversity.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Obrigada, Marcelo. Ótima resposta. We'll go now with Joshua. Also on the next, once Joshua answers this first question, we'll take in questions from the audience. So please write down your answers if they can be in small paragraphs, so it's easier to read. Joshua, please tell us what you are putting into action and into motion from food positive, nature positive food narrative into action. And what is at the heart, what is at the essence, at the center of caring for land, water, and the environment that you can motivate others to do.
Thank you very much, Bibi. And I'm very glad to be here with everyone. And very good to see Tosi, because I saw Tosi last during the climate dialogues. And I know it was a very exhausting period at that time. So really nice to see you again. And I had something to say, but when I heard Laila talk, I immediately remembered my childhood. And I'm just going to talk about how I grew up. And it's fascinating because these are some of the best days of my life. As a child, one of my first hobbies I had was gardening and eventually farming. This was the same for almost everyone I knew in my class in the community school I attended. We will meet up over the weekend, helping one another to fence our garden, preventing them for livestock from getting into it. We weed the farmlands, we harvest the crops, we make meals together, copying our mother's recipes. And these days were great days. We interacted a lot around these topics. When I look at myself now, these were the days that taught me the role of seasons. You eat what is available, not what you dream of, because food doesn't fall from the sky. It taught us patience. It taught us interconnectedness of soil, water, air, role of organisms in pollination. It taught us healing. For when we were sick, we plucked the leaves of our plants to heal ourselves. When we sow and the rains delay, we go to bed with anxiety. When it's rain, we bath under the rain, and we look forward to the small green leaves coming out of the soil during germination. But now there's a huge distance between young people and the food that they eat when we talk about real food. Many indigenous crops we have in our communities are undervalued by youth. I mean, including backyard crops, which we knew as kids, like cocoyam leaves, the different types of nuts, millet, cocoyam. And this is because the increase in industrial food production, which is driving a very massive unrestricted marketing and advertisement on processed food with big labels on nutritional benefits, which we all know that's not the truth, unsustainable production of food. And majority of today's society tend to shy away from our indigenous crops because they do not have the same labeling, the same branding, and the same marketing, which we see on our television and our radio. So how can agriculture be nature positive and enthusiastic for a younger person and a younger generation that is very used to what they see on their screens? And even when young people are interested in agriculture, we have to admit that it doesn't become attractive and they face so many hindrances, including access to land, lack of a community of sustainable agricultural practices that could make it engaging, as my childhood, where we knew we had a community doing this together. Our soils are polluted, and mostly, I mean, from where I come from, most of our soils are the mercy of the extractive industry, mainly mining. So how, as a young person, would I find agriculture attractive? Through the Green Africa Youth Organization, which I'm leading, we are working together through education, through community engagement to restore this. Currently in Sub-Saharan Africa, we know that 60% of our waste is still organic waste. But because these valuable waste are still mixed with electronic waste, plastic waste, and other type of waste, they all end up in dump sites, which causes pollution to soils, to underground water. And the way to reduce that is through burning. And burning them causes a lot of pollution for communities. We are teaching communities on waste segregation, setting up community compost farms where young people can compost and start community gardens themselves. Through this project, we are empowering young people, leveraging on education, waste reduction, community engagement, on food production, to shift attention back to the food systems we know when we were kids. Indigenous food recipes, cooking together, meeting together to dialogue. And we've grown over 2,000 trees together with community farmers on their farmlands as a way to restore agroecology as we know it to be back in the days. We've set up an indigenous crop nursery center with the main focus of making it possible for people to access indigenous seedlings that they could grow without having to think of it as something they have to do necessarily as a profession. Because here's the thing, if you have an ornamental plant in your office, you take care of it. Why can't we do the same for food? So reintegrating this into communities for young people to realize that this is something you could do the same way you fancy an organic, an ornamental plant in an office. This is possible for food. We need to get our hands dirty And through this, we are re-establishing the concept of waste to taste, moving organic waste and livestock waste into compost for farmers, smallholder farmers, and working together to educate the public on the essence of nutrition and not quantity. And this is because over the past years, we've seen that a lot of crop diversity that comes on the market are focusing on the marketing, how much produce you get as a farmer at the end of the farming season, and not really focusing on nutrition. And we are working on this as well. And I see this as fundamentals because our food is our health. And I saw the comment in the chat emphasizing this. And I was very happy to see that because our food is our health. And the way we can restore good health, public health for all of us is through the food we eat. And we need to emphasize on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And now we'll move on. With the series of questions that I'll be asking, I would love for you to have a perspective also on the faith side of it. And Joshua, I'm still gonna ask a bit of that because you were talking about I believe like some sort of purpose, right, for young people. How do we assess that purpose to large corporations and even individual styles, but mostly large corporations and how they, I don't know, what would be an example of that?
When I think about this, I find it very challenging because when I think of individuals, I think of the word proximity. I believe that when people get proximity to anything, they have a better perspective. And the more people are drawn away from food, real food, and they are picking something from the shelf, it's an object. It's not a living thing anymore. It's not a being anymore. And we need to restore that value of seeing food as a being. For corporations, I believe that the way we can reassess this is through a similar approach of getting corporates to really get closer to reality of what they are doing. If we allow corporates to really do a lot of the marketing, hiding behind businesses for profit and not thinking from businesses for health, businesses for well-being, we cannot make progress. If they can just readjust marketing, just the marketing sector alone, even to look at health and well-being, that will be a starting point to really start shaping what you put out there to market and how is that contributing to health and well-being. We know that many cities are restructuring these days, focusing on health and well-being, and that is a good start. So again, proximity to health and well-being as a topic and not seeing food as something you put on the market for people to buy and just as a consumable product will be a good starting point for corporations to reconsider. And I think that at this point, that is even a little bit late. We need to go in from the angle of really putting a stop to certain forms of marketing and allowing people to make conscious decisions for themselves. Because believe me, we are not making decisions as we want to make. We are making decisions based on what information we are receiving every day from being on the street. You didn't ask for it, but everywhere you see advertisement and it gets to you at a certain point. And for younger generations, this is not a question of what they are deciding to do. It's a question of what they are being told to do from excessive marketing.
Wow, excellent words, Joshua. Thank you so much. While you were talking, I remembered that I didn't mention this at the beginning. Actually, young people are really suffering the effects of multiple years of what WWF says, destruction of land and water. And also considering the effects that we have of this with zoonotic diseases you were talking about. We're all talking about health. I mean, health for the planet, health for the people. And we see that what stops the economy isn't necessarily, let's say, stock markets. It is health. And where did this pandemic even come from? I'm not really sure, but zoonotic diseases are moving forward when there is land degradation and that. So with that, I want to go on with Tosi. Tosi, you were mentioning at the beginning the areas of the 3 focus areas, right? That in Action Track 3, they're called areas of collective action and innovation. In short, I read it ACI. It's called And well, I don't know if you know, but acai is a fruit that is from the southern part of Latin America, usually in Brazil, Argentina, perhaps Uruguay. And I was just like, this is perfect because acai is a superfood that is grown in this very nature positive atmosphere. So it's a great wording. Dulce, I don't know if you know about acai, but I was very glad to see it and I could relate. And so how do you integrate these areas of collective action in producing and consuming countries in a market-driven economy and mentality? So again, what Joshua was saying about that market economy and mentality, even marketing, and what are the incentives and trade-offs of putting nature as a priority in that sector?
Thank you very much. I've traveled many times over the past 2 decades, several times to Latin America, but I haven't been introduced to acai yet. I look forward to doing so next time I travel, or actually I will look for it around me. That said, yes, I think that there is a paradigm shift. I really think that big corporations are no longer just looking for profit. I think many of them are looking at a way to positively impact the environment, the people around them, who at the end will be the customers. So customers have more and more power, I believe, and a lot of the policies and investment decisions are now becoming more decentralized because people understand that a customer who is not happy is a customer who will not return. So in the long run, if you are to be prosperous business, you need to take into account the longer term perspective of people. Because if your name is associated with a scandal, if your name is associated with bad practices, if your name is associating with not having the highest level of social and environmental safeguards, if you are not concerned about issues such as equity, fairness, the rights of indigenous people, if you're not concerned about tenure rights for women, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, you will end up shooting yourself in the foot because with time people will look away from you and people will look at alternatives. So it is today only common sense for big business to join in and come into this virtual circle where they can look at what are the best practices. Because even if those are a little bit more onerous and costly in the short run, in the long run, it is a gain for everyone. Because I think someone earlier said, we only have one planet, there's no planet B. And those businesses, if they help destroy the planet, where will they go to make business after that? So to make a long story short, I think that with the general conscious of people becoming more and more aware in today's world, which has become a small village with the technological transformation, I think there is so much information that no one can again try to hide behind closed doors and promote bad practices. There is this strong push for a higher moral standards to be applied to everyone. And I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture. It is simply the truth. And hopefully with the food summit, with all the solutions, which for many of them are going to be bottom up, we'll be able, all of us, to put good ideas together and see what could be a common path because we have only one planet, we have only one future, and we are condemned to find ways to coexist in a virtuous manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Tosi. I'd love to open up to either Felipe, Iyad, Who wants to jump in on what do they have to say?
I'm very happy to jump in. I really like the conversation, and I'm in agreement, fully in agreement with the theory. Practice is a bit more challenging, I would say. I like what Joshua says. You know, we have to make sure that these other values get into the equation, and I think Tosi is right that there's a big amount of corporate leadership trying to make this work. However, the consumer awareness is not leveled up, and we need to level it up. You cannot equate the level of consumer awareness in progressive European countries as in emerging economies like India and China. And in what we work on supply chains related to soft commodities, that, if it's not well understood, leads to more polarization and it could lead to a stronger impact into communities in producer countries. So if I'm going to put an example, we have now the European Commission pushing forward a legislative proposal to tackle deforestation. And I think we are all supportive about that. And the ambition level is high, and that's positive. However, the devil is in the details. How you go about the mechanisms of implementation, that's critical, because you can end up with a legislation that allows you not to import deforestation into Europe. However, that doesn't mean you're solving the deforestation problem. That deforestation might be migrating to emerging markets. And if it's too harsh, you know, those leading companies that Tosi is mentioning about, if they're going to be taken to court in European courts just because, you know, the due diligence mechanism that gets proposed, they might, just because they manage risk, they might just be, you know, cutting off the link with producers, the high risk producers, you know, that they're trying to convert into good practices. And those might be trapped by unsustainable supply chains. So what I want to get to is, like, we need to have strategies to make sure that there's a level playing field in terms of the consumer awareness. And I think this is where spaces as the UNFSS summit, it's critical. You know, we need to send the message across the countries, both those that want to go in the lead and those that are falling behind. Hey, we have to close the gap here. It makes no good to have 5 countries, you know, really with everyone committed, and then the problem is turned to another scenario. So that's my input, trying to activate.
Thank you. Gracias. Thank you, Felipe. Gracias. Iad, I want to have on this take as well, taking on that momentum, 2 different balances that I'd love to ask. One is, how do you balance corporate strategy with spirituality? And then also, how do you balance nature or corporate strategy towards nature with faith?
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, everybody, for a wonderful discussion. And I very much agree with what Felipe mentioned. It is the consumers who are the leaders, and not, you know, any other leaders or the corporates. It is us. It is the individual practices. If you want to promote the work of a corporation that, you know, destroys the environment, extradicate everything that they touch, you have the say to buy or not to buy, and to consume or not to consume. So the leadership starts at the individual level. Now, going to the spiritualities and the faith organizations and faith institutions, we also need to understand that faith institutions are also corporations. So there are businesses that claim to be faith-based, and there are corporations that are being invested by faith-based organizations. We know that the faith institutions are the fourth largest economic power on earth. So how do they get their economy? It is by investing. And where do they invest? They invest in forestry, they invest in mining, they invest in industries, and so on. So again, if we want to practice what we preach, we need to, as I always keep saying, when we do business, we have to think about our prayers. And when we pray, we think about our businesses. So it is something that we need always to bring the values, the principles, the ethical approaches, the set of standards that the religions and faith perspectives bring forward in being ethical approaches, whether in investment or whether in running corporations and so on. And final from my side, the type of economy as well that we always consider is that the economy that is based on cash flow, or economy that is based on human economic well-being, rather than well-being of at a comprehensive approach. So we need to introduce into the the financial balance of corporations the natural capital of their investments. Then we can say if this business is profitable or not. So whether it brings profits to nature as well, in addition to bringing profit to the company itself, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iyad. And the chat is really, with so many comments. There are more to say that, but keep it going, and please do answer there too. I want to go also from something that came up from Action Track 2 as well, is the women's position in all of this and the leadership position. And we in this one we were talking about really different forces and a dichotomy going on between different either positive nature or positive profit, but then how can we converge, right? And I'd love for Laila, for you to give us a sense of understanding after hearing all of this. You were mentioning before in our pre-call about innovation on land management. So how can we bring in the name of where Marcelo works, that harmony back into this dichotomy? And what is the role of women in transforming this change?
Yeah. Well, I like to speak from my cultural lens, because I believe my ancestors were quite evolved, honestly. So we get our clans from our mothers. In American culture, you get your last name from your father, but in our culture, you get it from your mother. And we kind of joke, we say Father Sky and Mother Earth. So we joke and say, okay, the men are in charge of everything in the sky, including offerings to certain stars and prayers, etc. The women oversee everything on the earth, Mother Earth, Father Sky. So it's sort of a funny joke of just the women are kind of the bosses in my culture. And not in a tyrannical way, not in a, like, matriarchy is different than patriarchy. It's not just a transposition of the whole hierarchy power structure just transferred to women. It's actually focused around life. So I like the word matrifocal. When we put women at the center, we're not really putting women at the center. We're putting life at the center, as they are the life bearers. And so when the support of women arguably is perhaps our greatest task. And I say this drawing also from the Lakota tradition, who, they were given the sacred pipe long ago by white buffalo calf woman, 17 generations ago, I've heard. And what was going on at the time is they were starving. There was social discord. There was no harmony in the community. There was all kinds of problems. And when she came to them, she said, I'm going to answer your prayers. She gave them the pipe, which has two components, the masculine and the feminine. And she said, this right here, this nexus between masculine and feminine, that is where you have to fix things. Because until you get that right, your economy, your food systems, your all of that is hinging on this ability to honor the feminine and the masculine equally is where your real problem is. It's like all this other stuff is symptomatic. The core and the crux of your issue is that you're not honoring women. And I've heard Oren Lyons speaking with Karena's father, Al Gore, on a panel once. And Oren was saying, yeah, you know, the Americans took the concept of democracy from us as Haudenosaunee people, which I don't know if you know that, but a lot of the founding fathers of America were very heavily influenced by the native governance structures of democracy, where the people were the leaders. And arguably, they co-opted that governance structure and created what we now know as the American democracy. And so Oren was saying, you guys did a lot of things right, but the thing, when our elders went to your government, they said, you forgot a really important thing. Where is the women? Where are your women leaders? He said that was a really important part of our governance structure. And without that, you're not really understanding the heart of our democracy. And so patriarchy is a very ubiquitous, omnipresent thing. It surrounds us. We swim in it like water. We don't even notice we're swimming in it sometimes. What men can get away with and what women would never dare get away with is striking. And it's not to say we're bad people. It's just to say this is what we've been raised in as children. And there's so many men and women who are working so hard to sort of dwindle this patriarchy and say, and revamp matriarchy. And so the argument, as far as I can tell, is this: if we support women, not to say all women are perfect, myself included, we have our issues obviously too, but we have our hand on the pulse of the next generation as we have given birth to that generation. And so if we are looking to create a world that is supportive of future generations, maybe we should talk to those who are very in touch on an intuitive, arguably spiritual level of what that next generation needs. That's sort of the underlying argument of why so many cultures around the world developed a really strong matriarchy, strong matrifocality. And I think all of us, men and women, benefit from matriarchy or matrifocality. It's not just for women, it's for all life. And I love when all of my brothers join me in that effort. I've seen it many times and it's a beautiful sight.
Thank you so much, Lila. I actually have a shirt here that says love in some part here. We were discussing this in our pre-call as well, and a lot of it was mentioned about the heart. You mentioned now the heart. Had also mentioned the heart part. That is why also one of the questions, what is at the heart of all of this? To use different ways of understanding the essence, right? That the heart of it, and also understand the heart of where we're living, right? And a lot of that I heard today was, again, seasons, language, listening to communities, the leadership, the energy. And I love for Marcelo to tell us briefly, since we have only 2 minutes left, how, and it's something similar that I asked Lila, but in your perspective, how can we bring this convergence back into bringing that hearty perspective back in us, and also to institutions, policies, corporations, and honoring our Mother Earth.
I think Joshua said one thing, that we must be connected with the nature. We must be connected with the things we buy, with the things we consume. So the origin of all we buy or consume, it's very important. And once we have connected with it, we can be connected with who produce the goods we buy. We can be connected to the earth that is cultivated by the men and the women, and we can realize the system. Like we lost the system view of all things, and we need to reconnect with it. And another thing, it's like we must create powerful dreams. We must create images to change things, and not to change things as Joshua wrote. I think Joshua wrote in the chat, like, oh, I have a goal for 2050 to zero carbon. No, we need to change now. Like we have in the Amazon rainforest, we have 10 years. Like we are almost in the turning point, and we must to be radical listeners. We must be radical dreamers. And I think the dream create images that we can have faith in these images and change fast. We must escape of some places that we just see some path. Like we need to think out of the box. We need to create different things to value traditional communities, to value the forest, to be reconnected. If you are in the middle of the city, try to find something that you really know where it's coming from, that we try to find the history of the good of the ingredient and so on. Like I put in the chat a project that we are involved as well. Like it's an origin label. Like there are many kinds of label. This is a label that shows you exactly where are the ingredients came from in the Amazon rainforest, for example. And I think this we need to create this connection and fast. We don't have much time to do this change.
And to finish up, thank you so much, Marcelo. Joshua, you wrote something on the chat that what is your now that